the beginner training frequency and volume. Now, this is a question that I get a lot, where people ask me, I've just been going to the gym for a couple of months. What are the types of training protocols that I need to follow? Should I be training 15 sets per workout? Should I be
Mm.
training 20 sets? Should I be training 10 sets? Should I be training a muscle twice a week, once a week, thrice a week? So this is a question that I get a lot. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think when you're in the first couple months, I think it's really important to just emphasize something that gets you the most consistency. Because even if you're in the ballpark of reasonable, you're going to be pretty much maxing out the gains you can make as a novice because, hey, like progressive overload, that's the key. And everything you're doing right now is progressive overload because you weren't training at all before. So I think, honestly, anywhere in the range of like, if we're talking people who are taking this seriously, but they don't have like competitive aspirations, anywhere in the range to 2 to 4 days per week is really sufficient. And if you are doing fewer sessions per week, you're probably going to have to train, more muscle groups per session if we're talking about like a bodybuilding focus. So if you're only coming in the gym twice per week, that's probably, you pretty much decided that's going to be an upper and a lower, or it's going to be 2 full body sessions. And I think a general thing to do is to stick with a sufficient but relatively low total volume because you don't need much as a beginner. You really don't. And then only once you've plateaued and you're not able to come to the gym and see progress on the lifts that you're using, that's when you would probably want to bump up the volume. Um, so, your typical split might be upper, lower, full body, 3 days per week. And then you can have a little more volume on the upper and the lower with a few more isolation movements on those days. And then you focus a little more on compound movements on that full body day. Generally, what you want to make sure you have included is a horizontal press, a horizontal pull, a vertical press, a vertical pull, and then some type of hip hinge and some type of squat with really liberal interpretations of what those all mean. So if you like incline, that can be your horizontal press. If you like RDLs, but not deadlifts from the floor, that can be your hinge. If you're afraid of deadlifts or you don't feel like you have a good coach to teach you how to do them and you're nervous about that, a weighted back extension is totally fine. If you are tall and you have poor ankle mobility and you don't like squatting and you feel like people are watching you or it's a hassle to fight for a squat rack in your gym, jump on the leg press. That's all good. You really only have to do a specific movement, not one of those categories I said, if you want to get stronger at that movement. Like if you want to be a power lifter, well, you got to do the sport, of bench, squat, and deadlift. So ultimately, it comes down to finding things that fit into those categories, something that fits into your schedule. And then I would generally recommend starting with a low to moderate volume, somewhere in like, say, the 4 to 8 sets per muscle group range, and
Per
focus on
week,
high
right?
quality training. Yeah, per week,
Per week.
4 to 8 sets per
Okay.
muscle group per week. And I don't think you need much more than that. Could you get slightly faster gains with doing more? Maybe if you're doing everything right and perfectly, but most of the time you're not. And I would like just to see you focus on getting a good mind muscle connection, having good technique, being able to use a full range of motion, and really just learning how to move properly and safely in the gym. And that's what I'd recommend. And then just focusing on consistent, measurable, but steady increases in progress on a week to week basis. Increasing reps, increasing load when you can, or one or the other, or both, depending on what your goals are. And that's the high level overview, and we can get into more specifics if you want.
Right. And another thing that I get asked a lot is, even I had this question. So the first year of my training, I did not do any kind of squats or deadlifts or bench press. I mean, I did bench press, but I did more of a dumbbell bench. I did not do the
Mm.
whole flat bench. And, of course, I made great gains. Now, like you said, that unless you want to get into the powerlifting side of things in the for the future, do you really think people can still make the same amount of gains? If you take a person X and a person Y, a person X does the traditional so-called big three lifts all the time, and the other person, he just focuses on stimulating his muscles, activating all the right kind of muscles. And if you compare them 1 year from now, do you think both of them will make the same gains, or the person who did the big lifts like the compound lifts and the other person who did just like your bodybuilding type of workouts, who do you think would make more gains if you compare that way?
Well, it really depends on what you mean. So if someone is just focusing on like activating and stimulating and just getting a feel, but they haven't actually induced progressive overload, then definitely the person doing the big lifts.
Right.
But if we're talking about someone who's doing, say, incline dumbbells at a higher rep range and, hammer strength rows, and the other person is doing, weighted chin ups and bench press, but they're both using progressive overload, they're both ensuring that it's sufficient stimulus, it probably wouldn't be much difference at all in
Right.
terms of hypertrophy. It really comes down to, we have to think about like, we don't gain muscle because we're following the program that aligns with what bodybuilders say is ideal. We gain muscle because we're creating progressive tension overload in the muscles we're trying to grow.
Right.
So if you achieve that, you're going to grow, and you could do that by so many different ways. That's why you see powerlifters with amazing pecs, why you see calisthenics guys who do a ton of different types of push-ups with amazing pecs, and why you also see bodybuilders who maybe don't do bench press at all and only train in the 8+ rep range who have amazing pecs. So ultimately, it comes down to just focusing on those big picture principles and understanding what is actually causing muscle growth,
Right.
and not getting too caught in the weeds, especially when you're a novice and you really just need to focus on those big blocks and consistency.